evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Yesterday we met, myself and the chief met with Mr. Consalvo.
Can you just make sure you're on the mic? Sorry, thank you.
Yesterday, myself and the chief met with Mr. Consalvo at the property of 55 High. We did walk the site. I did email it out to the board and invited whoever wanted to come. Just myself and the chief. We walked the site, we walked through the building. The building is structurally sound, as the report here says from an engineer. So there is nothing as a building commissioner I can do to say, hey, tear it down.
Excuse me. Can I, Madam Chair?
Mr. Lee?
So is there not a blighted property ordinance in the town? Okay, so hold on one second. So can we very nicely ask them if they're going to keep their building to side it? I mean, come on. How long we've been dealing with this? I mean, the reason your position was created was because of this area. So can we talk to the owners and make, say, can we get this sided? Would you like to live next door to it? Have them sided. That would be a great start.
Mr. Lee, if somebody from the board was there yesterday, they would have heard us asking that.
But that's what we hired you for.
Correct.
Right.
The board was so interested in that property, we invited a couple of members to come out.
All I'm saying, excuse me, all I'm saying is, can you ask them to sign it?
We spoke to them, and Mr. Consalvo was going to come here tonight.
Oh, he's here.
Oh, he's here?
Yeah.
Oh,
great.
So, we did speak to him concerning that. First step, he's going to be cleaning up the landscaping, all the debris that's around the building, clean that up. Then he's going to start working on the building. Again, we walked through the building. It is structurally sound. They're in, well, I can ask Mr. Consalvo to come up to explain what their...
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Consalvo, if you could come up.
Direction they're going.
Before you do that, as Selectman Lee said, so we have we're doing the blighted property.
Correct.
So the way we used to do it, and I'm going to ask you if you're doing it, the fire chief, the board of health, and the police chief are the committee for blighted property to go around and do an inspection of the building, including yourself, to make sure it's structurally sound and then write up the conditions of the building. If it meets the state building code, CMR 7080, if it meets the public health, and the fire safety stuff was put out by the NFPA standards. That's how the board works for blighted property. Those 5 individuals, have you all went there? I guess I'm asking you the question. Did you go there with the police chief, the board of health, the fire chief, and yourself and do an inspection with the property owner?
We went out there. None of us have a stamp, a structural engineer stamp, to say it is not structurally sound. That's what the letter was for. So I didn't want to involve the police chief.
I'm asking you the question. It's very simple. The blighted property through the Attorney General's office, and the way we did it before in the town of Holbrook was we had 5 people appointed. With one, I'll go back to the past. Eddie O'Brien, the fire chief, the former police chief, Mr. Marble, the building inspector, Mr. Moriarty, the board of health person. They would go around and inspect the property and then come back. We tore a house down on Arnold Street with those 5 recommendations. Everybody signs off. That's why we have a building inspector. You're in charge of the CMR 780. Katie Goldrick and the Board of Health, the 111 health standards, and the fire chief, of course, with the fire regulations, NFPA guidelines. So I'm asking, so there should be a report based on, from all 5 individuals. We did an inspection with the property owner. Here are the findings. We have people talking about asbestos flying all across, debris flying all across at one point, and that we've been going on for this for approximately 15 months. people bringing pictures up of the property. So my question is the building safe? If it's structurally, that's good in your point, but is it safe, according to the Board of Public Health? Did they do an inspection, and what were their findings? And is it sprinkled? You know, I'm gonna ask the fire chief, is the building sprinkled in case of a fire? Does it meet the standards? So those are the questions. We're not trying to beat you up here, but when we say, and I've said this 1,000 times, that we adopt blighted property in the town of Holbrook. And we were gonna adopt the Attorney General's program, blighted property. And that's how I'm explaining to you how it works. We need all 5 of you individuals to be on board. With your expertise as the building inspector, the chief with his expertise on fire safety, the Board of Health on the health issues of the health and welfare of the town, you have to work together as a team. There's no I in team. You have to work together as a team, regardless if you like each other, you don't like each other. You all have to be involved. You all have to come back to this board and report the findings. It's that simple. If everybody, you guys got a schedule with each other to make sure that these things are being done and being done the right way. I don't care about the guy sitting back there that you had a meeting with him. There's been plenty of opportunities to have meetings. I want to know from everybody who works for the town involved in this, do we meet those standards? Health, fire, construction, and public safety. That goes to the police chief.
Madam Chair.
That's what he was asking you, sir.
Mr. Watkins?
Again, letter from an engineer, structurally sound. We also have a letter from DEP. We also have the reports from the consultants that did the of the asbestos.
Director,
Okay.
I remember sitting here the last time you was here, and it was asked of you then to have the place boarded up. And I want to know now, is the place boarded up?
It was, and photos were sent out. It's not totally boarded up. The upstairs windows have plastic in them, and it was told for lighting purposes and safety purposes up on the second floor to leave them, the plastic there, unless it starts deteriorating and blowing, coming out, then board it up. If the fire department has to go in there for any reason, they need some light in there, natural lighting. So that's what we said, boarded up the down the bottom, and it's safe, so nobody can get in there. But the upstairs, we wanted some light up there. So there's a couple of walls that still do have the plastic, and it's a heavy, like burlap plastic to allow lighting up there.
Madam Chair, through
Mr. Lee.
you, could you come up, Mr. Gonzalez?
I was gonna ask.
Yeah, if you could come up.
Yep.
As you can see, emotions are running high on this subject. It's been a long time, and one of the reasons that we created the position of Inspectional Service Director was for this. We were getting a lot of complaints in that area of town. I'm not going to say it was all your property, but that started the comments coming in and the citizens' comments. So I'm asking you tonight, can you get the place sided up so you can, or painted something so it looks halfway decent, coming in, entering the town of Holbrook? You got neighbors living there, and I know that the Inspectional Service Director has been working with you, but it's been a long time. Don't get me wrong. I understand that you guys there was work stopped when the DEP came in. I know you guys were doing it over at that time. But we're asking you tonight, can we get that cleaned up?
To give you a short answer on that, I really can, but a short history on where we are with the property. I realized before we purchased it in 2017, it was a blighted property at that point. It didn't have siding, didn't have a sprinkler system or any of those things. space there, and at the same time, rehabilitate the remainder of the building and to entice new tenants to take that space. As a general contractor, the third generation, we have a ton of experience with historical and mill building renovations, so we thought this would be right up our alley. In 2017, we demoed a few buildings that were unusable and unsafe. We applied and received a occupancy building permit to start our cabinet shop on the brick building along the train tracks on the Spring Street side, and also to the immediate repair of the roof. Replace the entire roof to a rough cost of about $350,000. And at that time, right about that time, as we were replacing it, the world crashed down on us. Basically, is that we had two different reports from abatement inspectors showing that the property did have asbestos, minor amounts of asbestos that were within the property, which our game plan at the time was to forgo those and replace this roof, and then we can safely work on the inside to take care of those. DEP was notified, and the fourth time they came to visit us while we were demoing the roof, they decided we didn't have enough tests in the roof and took another 100 samples, which one of them came back hot. At that time, the entire property was hot. Everything we ever touched, the entire site. They also asked us to clean any of the neighboring properties, which is why the white suits were going around. This cost us upwards of $1.5 million to clean a single piece of asbestos. This was obviously not in our budget and pretty much sidetracked us for, I think, to say up until about 8 months ago, 2021. And in that period, at the same time, as we've been paying, working with the DEP, working with the town as best as possible, I admit we're doing the bare minimum that we can as far as keeping the property safe. We met there a month ago. We promised to board up any of the obvious openings to keep any people and keep the property safe. Yesterday we discussed to meet another 2 weeks, and we can agree to clean up all the landscaping around, clean up any debris within and without outside of the fencing. And my plan was in at the same time is to begin pricing to see what we can do for the next step of capital improvement to side it, and also to appease the safety of it is install a full sprinkler system, which is also going to cost about $500,000. And siding, roughly with the metal gauge, we did we did the brick side of the building there along the tracks, and then we also did a small portion along across from 84 lumber, just to kind of show a sample of what we can make this building look like. To pivot on all this is the situation that myself and my partners in. We have a building that is useless as of right now. We had a couple of offers from neighboring properties that offered to purchase it, so we were chasing that route. And some of their plans were to demolish all the buildings. So with that in turn, we just held off on my side something that we've already roofed and that could possibly very well be demolished. Kicking it also down the line, the only other true possible tenant we found is marijuana cultivation. Surprisingly, a building of this size, only 10-foot ceilings, does not have a lot of uses for modern industries. But this particular one we're working on for the last 8 months, we have a potential tenant with a certain amount of licenses, but would obviously take the entire process, which I know the town is familiar with more than I am, because with Mass Medical down the street. I think at this time I asked that if you could help us with beginning this process. We also talked to the town lawyer, and there was an issue of whether having Mass Medicum does not allow any other cultivation sites within the town, which if that was stated, we would forego this and start working on plan C and D. But if I can assure that we can follow the steps, which we are taking, show good faith on trying to get a sprinkler system designed and installed in the building, pricing out my options, deciding, but what would help us is actually having a process started that we know we can actually make this space occupiable by a possible tenant that will pay rent, basically. Having that assurance, we would, at this point, get outside investors, basically, to commit money to improving the property, with the assurance that there would be, returns to this investment.
So just so you know, the Mass Medicum is down in the area in the industrial park where it's zoned for. So your area of town is not zoned for cultivation or anything marijuana related, so that wouldn't be an option. In order for them to go for, zoning permits and all of that, that would be a very long time to go to town meeting, to get votes, to go to all of that. So that's not really a kind of amount of time that we have to wait for that. Also, there is a percentage of, I want to say, liquor licenses that each town has, and that's the percent of marijuana facilities you can have in town. So we meet that threshold already with Mass Medicum. So having additional facilities, I don't.
We actually brought a counsel who's on Zoom right now, and we looked through the host agreement that the town has with Mass Medical,
Yeah.
but we couldn't find anything there that says it was exclusive to Mass Medical.
It's inappropriate, Madam Chair.
Okay. So we're not going to keep discussing that further, but
So I have a question for you. So, on the asbestos, why didn't you tent the building?
It's a 100,000 square foot, 3-acre building.
Yeah, but you knew, because you just said you knew it was loose stuff and it was going into the community, you had to pay to clean it up. Why would you tent that to prevent that stuff from going into people's yards?
I can give you a pretty long explanation to all of that, but the start of it
Did
is
you get a permit? I mean, did he have a permit to remove that?
to remove the roof. We did.
Yeah.
And we also had 2 inspection companies by abatement companies that did not have asbestos on the roof. We had a clean roof by 2 different inspection companies. We are now in a lawsuit with both of those companies. One of them is from the people that sold us the property, and the other is one that we hired independent.
Are you being sued by any of the residents?
No, because the residents were never in any harm.
Well, you just said that you had to clean up their property.
We had to clean up everything, but there was no asbestos found anywhere other than one sample and one. I have a long list. I can show you a log line of everything that we went through. The DP. Essentially, we spent $1.5 million, and none of the world became any safer. We took everything there and we moved it to a site in New Hampshire and buried it in the ground.
Madam Chair.
So, I guess as my colleagues here, we've been going through this for years now. What is your ultimate goal here? I mean, we can't say you're going to do this, you're going to do that. What are you going to do in the immediate future to make it safe for the residents? And it's not a nice here, and it's not an eyesore to the residents who live down there. Their property values go down on that property. You have plastic blowing across the street. It's not fair to the residents. So what are you going to do in the short term to fix that?
In the short term, basically, we discussed is make sure there's any other windows. There's a few other broken glass pieces on the other side to completely fix those. That it's not an accessible building. It's safe. No one can break in. Secondly, to clean up the perimeter of it, the landscaping of it, any stone and debris that's allowed there, any couches that got left there on the side of the road.
So what's the time frame? When are you going to start?
That's to be done in the next 2 weeks. It's in the last month, we talked about removing any of the plastic set. We're working on a set of shop drawings with a sprinkler consultant, an engineer, to develop new sprinklers for the building. It did have a full sprinkler system in 2017. We started repairing sections of it. When DEP also kicked us out of the building, it all was destroyed. It froze, so we have to replace the entire thing. So, a long story short, we're in a tough shape with this investment. Real estate aside, we don't have much dollars to flop to these other positions, which is our best case scenario was to hire counsel and see what the options were for cultivation. We We've tried storage warehouses. It's 100,000 square feet of real building. It's beautiful on the inside, as much as ugly as on the inside. All the exterior walls are simply partitions. It's timber frame, which is why it's structurally sound. But we ran out of money basically to improve it, to at least put decent real estate sign that we could build the suit.
How old is the building?
How old? I found some drawings from 1910, 1920. There's a lot of different pieces of parcel of building in there too. All kind of going on together.
Mr. Watkins?
You know, I understand and hear your pain. But as a property owner or developer or business owner, you know there's risk. There's risk in any deal. I mean, it could, I mean, and this so happens to be a bad deal for you at the end of the day, right? Because you're talking about you have to, you know, hire an attorney and file lawsuits. But the issue is, and I've heard you say this a couple of times, bare minimum. I'm doing the bare minimum. Residents that live here, if I had a property next to your home, you wouldn't want me to be doing the bare minimum. You would want me to do everything that I can to box this thing up. And I would suggest that, you know, whatever you can muster up is to box it up so that it won't be a blight in the community. And I understand, you know, the investment went south or sour, and as you said you don't even have any money really to throw into it. And getting a sprinkler system is going to cost a hell of a lot as well. So at the end of the day, I think, you know, what I've heard from residents is that they want the space, you know, not being an eyesore. So let's get it to that point where it's not an eyesore, and it can't look like the bare minimum. It got to look like I really respect the residents in this area, and I'm doing everything that I possibly can to make sure that I don't damage their property, because that eyesore damages their property value, right? So
I know this, it's kind of off topic, but since you brought it up, how would we, if the town was interested in doing it, what would that have to be? I'll ask you. If the town was looking to do cultivation, I know right now it's only zoned for Mere Road, right? 2 buildings on Mere Road. If
No.
The same process as the overlay.
The overlay.
It goes through the planning department for recommendation that have to propose their, what they want to do there, everything through that. The planning department will forward it to the board of selectmen and put it on the warrant for town meeting. So that would be a spot zoning, or this could be another overlay district. So,
But it'd have to be public hearings.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
it
Again, you know, the other cultivation plant that we do have, we don't even know what's there. There's only a handful of employees there. It's a clean operation, and right now, I was there the other day. And if you
I already said.
do it, don't stroll on there. But it's clean, like I said. Yeah, that's right. So anyways.
but the issue is in terms. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, to you, to the director.
ahead. What's up?
The issue is not necessarily,
Gentlemen, before you continue, can you just try to make sure you're speaking in that mic? As the people at home, if you're not in the mic, they can't hear you guys. Sorry.
the issue is not whether or not we can put a cultivation business there, because that's a long, arduous process. If once you go to town meeting, it's no guarantee that you're gonna get the result that you want.
Correct.
You know, and quite frank, you know, if you already got a business in town, that other business in town is gonna make sure that, you know, the residents does not want another business in town. But the problem is what we have right now, and how can we get to a solution right now that's going to satisfy those residents? Because I think you could tell me this, Director.
Yes, you can go.
Isn't there an issue with a marijuana facility being near a residence, a residential area? Don't it have to be so many?
It's an industrial, zone
I know, but you have residents in
within an industrial zone. Where our parcel is located is industrial.
In Brockton, they got them right next door to the houses. The old Papagino.
You're right next to Papagino?
Yeah, there is one house out on that.
All right, we're digressing, guys. Just a little bit.
So if I could, Madam Chair, I just want to read a couple of sentences for Mr. Riley about the asbestos. The asbestos abatement, this was from the DEP, Mr. Riley. The asbestos abatement activities were conducted by a Massachusetts Department of Labor Standards licensed asbestos contractor, and in accordance with Mass DEP approved non-traditional asbestos abatement work practice plans. All abatement activities were completed at the facility on October 30th, 2020. Now, the DEP didn't get the reports from the companies until February 21st and April 14th. We didn't get the final results. We did have some of the paperwork from the companies, but we did not get this letter until February 17th from the DEP.
2021.
Now 22. So the DEP didn't get the information from the companies after they completed it until, again, February 26th, 2021, April 14th, 2021. So I just wanted to read that letter so that the neighbors are aware. It is clean, and that is another thing it said. At this time, no additional asbestos abatement response action are required at this property. So there's a similar letter for 719 South Franklin Street, just to put that on record. So if any more of these buildings come up, they will be put on the website, all the information that we do have, so people spreading it out on Facebook.
Okay. We need to bring this back to 55 high.
Okay,
Conservo, is that how I say it? Consava. Okay, I just didn't want to say it wrong. I appreciate what you're going through. I appreciate what you've invested in. I appreciate what your partners are dealing with. But I have to worry about the residents. It has been too long. We can't sit here and wait any longer for what your tenants will or will not do. What we need to figure out is the eyesore that it is and how to make it no longer a blighted property. Like, it needs to look like it has curb appeal. It needs to something, paint it, side it, whatever, the sprinkler and the siding. If that can be your focus, maybe the better it looks, the easier it will sell instead of having to, but we need you to continue to make process and progress every day on as much as you possibly can and keep us informed.
Madam Chair, I was going to follow.
It's not fair to the residents. It is not fair that, the ones that live directly across the street have to stare at it. It's not fair that people come in and they look at it and they're like, where am I? And they look at this. And I understand that was not your intention, but it's what happened, and we have got to fix this. We can't wait any longer. We need you guys to figure out what it is that needs to be the next step.
So I think what we're looking for is a status report. Number one, you're gonna do the landscaping around the building with dates and times of completion.
Yep.
okay? And you make sure you make sure that's being done.
Mr. Erksing, in the mic. Thank you.
As I stated before, on 99 Spring Street, myself and the chief have been meeting with the owner over there for the past probably a year, maybe 2 to 4 weeks. We're putting this property on the same schedule so that we'll go out, look at the progress, and then we'll report to the board at the following meeting.
I hear there's unregistered businesses in 99 High Street. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
I hear there's unregistered businesses operating out of 99 High. Has that been addressed?
Aware of that. I can
Okay.
talk to the property owner.
That would be great. Let's get an update on that. Chief.
Madam Chair, if I may.
You could ask.
Mr. Gonzalez, could we get contact information to Mr. Hanley? I want to say, I think the biggest problem has been communication, okay? You're here tonight, you're answering, you're talking. Let's keep the open line of communication.
Appreciate
okay?
that. Thank you.
So that's what I think, and I know that the director has been doing what he's doing in following his book, including the chief and everyone else, but we haven't really, we hear the technical stuff, but we don't know what that means, right? The residents don't know what that means. So it's easy to say, yeah, they're in compliance, but when you put a face to it, like yourself coming in here tonight and talking, we have an open line of communication now. You get your contact information, and I'm sure we can work quickly to resolve these issues.
All right, really appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't mean to come up and tell you my story of woes, but in my pivotal part of it was, I understand the investment basically that's needed, and I can't say I have it, but we can move to that process. But if we have something, basically it's showing right now that it's a no-go, it's a shut-off, then I can pivot and get away from that. But if it's not, then we feel like it's something that's viable and work for, and we realize it will take 8, 10 months. We were talking about trying to get on the town meeting for, I believe that's your yearly one for May, or I think at this point it might be too late, but that was our thinking in some of this process.
And while, like I said, I understand that, and I know that, at least for you guys to have some sort of, line of sight and what your future is going to look like, the residents can't wait to see if that works for you guys or not. And that's what I'm asking you to not hold up. So like I said, whether you move forward with getting the sprinkler system in and getting the building sided for your tenants or side it for the new owner, but get it sided for the residents, and either way, it's a win-win. But we just need the residents across the street this spring and this summer. I'd like for them to have a barbecue, and for their people who park on the side of in front of their houses to not look at that every time they pull up. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to picture being invited to that house for a barbecue this summer. And that's what I want you to understand, that this is where they're coming from.
I understand that.
Okay, thank you.
And if they keep the line of communication with help, so I'll check up on the next meeting.
It would be great.
Try to attend as well.
We would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, Mr. Riley has a few questions for you.
I'm nervous.
Step right up.
I'm nervous, but
Yeah. So my question, does it meet the fire safety codes?
the answer is it does not. It has had a open violation. That property has had a number of violations issued to it over the years. It has an open violation to a number of reasons, but I'll cherry pick a couple of them. Namely, as Mr. Casalvo passed along, the fact that the sprinkler system froze, cracked pipes, and was non-functional. And secondarily, same concept, fire protection system, the fire alarm system was also damaged essentially beyond repair. So I'll keep it brief because I know we've been on topic for a long time, but those violations were issued prior to the asbestos abatement issue. We've been following up on them with the assistance of the building inspector as well, because that crosses both the building code and the fire code. And we've also been engaged in conversation with the property owner as well. The building is currently vacant and it does not have a permit to be occupied because of those issues and some other issues. And during our walk through the other day, yesterday, which was incidentally, as the building inspector pointed out, the asbestos abatement, this is a very complex site. So the asbestos abatement was dragged out far longer than any asbestos abatement I can ever remember in my career in the entire town. Very complicated issue. And it precluded us from entering the interior of the building to do the kind of follow-up that is actually much more customary under these sorts of circumstances. So, as the building inspector pointed out, even though the asbestos abatement was completed, I'll say some time ago, months to a year ago, we were not made aware via the documentation saying that, hey, this has been completed and it's safe to go into that property until only a few short weeks ago.
Well,
So that was a major obstacle to us doing the kind of follow-up that normally takes place under normal circumstances. So yesterday, with the assistance of Mr. Consalvo, who I think you could see is, in a difficult position, but is at least, when we set up meetings with him, he answers the phone, he comes down to the site, whatever we ask to do, he accompanies us. He's making an effort, in my opinion. Yesterday, we finally got to go inside because we're assured now that it was safe to do so. During that visit, we noticed some other fire code violations, which I issued him violations for, got assurances that those would be remedied immediately or as quickly as is humanly possible. And we scheduled a follow-up meeting 3 weeks. At my request, I'm not going to be available in 2 weeks, but 3 weeks from yesterday to, in fact, make sure that the assurances that you just got, the assurances we just got, are going to actually be seen through to completion. Specifically, boarding up some of the trouble spots that aren't boarded up, getting some of the cleanup done, most specifically on the Spring Street side, but again also on the High Street side as well, and also getting some preliminary plans for the fire sprinkler repairs and the fire alarm system repairs forwarded to us so that we can start a review on that, as it's pretty much the most critical concern possible. So, not possible. Most critical concern at the moment from that perspective, from the fire perspective.
okay, so a couple questions.
Yes.
From a public safety, do you think that building's fit? I mean, there's homes around there.
So,
I mean, you had a lot of violations here, so I'm
How
saying,
I would answer that question in my capacity as a fire chief is I would say that building is currently non-compliant with the fire code. And we have issued violations with that are stated to be corrected immediately. So we're saying the timeline is get these fixed, period, end of discussion. And we have assurances, as I just mentioned, that we're going to start seeing some, now that the property is safe to enter, now the interior of that structure is safe to enter because the asbestos abatement is complete and we have documentation that it's complete. We're expecting to see fire sprinkler plans, fire alarm system plans, and in the meantime, we're expecting to see the vacant building that does not have an occupancy permit secured adequately so that it presents the minimum danger to the general public as is possible under the circumstances.
that's why I'm asking these questions. Is the building insured?
Sure? Yes.
For, if you don't mind me asking, for how much?
Purchased it for about $400,000.
I'm just asking because of the residents that abut that property. something happened. The other thing, what type of heating system is in there?
Mr. Riley, if he's gonna continue, can you have him, you have a bunch of questions? I know, but I just want him to get to the mic, that's all.
Non-existent. We did bring a power system in. There's a 1600 amp panel brought to the transformer that we put out front, and we brought a gas line to the outside of the building, but there's no meter, there's no actual gas to the building.
Was that inspected?
Yes, and then Columbia Gas as well. So I think we haven't piped anything to it either, so that would be the actually interior with the building inspector and plumbing inspector, but we only had it brought to the underground, onto the site basically.
So you're using a portable heater?
No, we have no heat in the building as of right now. There's no heat in there whatsoever.
Chief?
You know where I'm going, right?
I do, but I just wanted, I apologize for interrupting, but the building isn't, there's no use of the
No
building
occupancy.
allowed. So there's no, and there's nothing to freeze in there. I don't believe there's a domestic water service.
Only to the face of the building.
There's only a domestic water service to the face of the building. The fire protection, as I mentioned, is defunct.
Yeah.
And so there's basically the only utility at that location is the new electrical service that National Grid provided that was installed and inspected under the jurisdiction of the electrical inspector. But it's aside from providing just a small amount of temporary lighting, it's not doing anything and it's not powering the building per se.
Okay, so under the fire regulations, does he have a certain time frame to put a sprinkler system in? A building? It's a certain time frame.
He
isn't
has
it?
there's a violation on this building saying that there was an existing there were existing fire protection systems that were not maintained and need to be restored as soon as possible.
But, you know, there is a guy, from when you find the violation, there is a corrective action amount of days, isn't there?
So, I mean, we can start issuing fines but I think it's fair to say that once you start issuing fines,
Yep. It's decision time. It's a decision time for the owner.
yep, and
Yeah, I get
there's a
what you're saying.
process to that as
Yeah,
well.
I understand that. But that's why I'm saying, we've been talking, with the residents for, I don't know, what, 18 months we've been talking about this? And I think,
But I think that we're moving forward. So if we can just keep that line of communication, this is the first time we've ever had the owner in here explaining everything. So if we can just keep
So,
that
yeah.
open line of communication and work to get this done.
Selectman Lee, I think what I'm trying to get, we've given them a lot of time. So my thing, and I hate to fine people, but I look at liability from the town. And I say, here's what I say to the folks in the town. It's called deliberate indifference. We know there's something wrong down there. And if we don't do anything to fix it, we're guilty of it. So now, that's why I asked you, Chief, is if they have that many violations, maybe it is time in the building inspector to hold his feet to the fire. And, if progress doesn't start soon, then fines should start soon to make sure he's being held accountable.
Through the chair, and I'll be very brief because this has been a long discussion. I would just respectively point out that I do not disagree with your statements or your general points. I would also just once again make a brief statement reminding or pointing out the complexity of the situation. And what I mean by that is, again, going back to the asbestos debate, which dragged on for literally years and prevented anyone from safely occupying the interior of this structure. You can't remediate a sprinkler system in a structure that is in the process of an asbestos abatement. You can't put workers in Tyvek suits.
Correct.
And so this, I think, is pertinent to this conversation and leads to why it was such a complex situation. So I don't dispute your commentary, and I think it's fair to say, I wish we had someone with us during Building Inspector Erskine's and myself and Mr. Consalvo's site visit yesterday, because all of the general commentary that the board has been expressing tonight, I think it's fair to say we expressed to the property representative yesterday. I think we were clear that the time has come for action that is visible by the general public. And I think I mean, I apologize for not being present at the meeting a few weeks ago. I was on Zoom, but the message was clear, and the message was delivered on behalf of the select board by myself and Director Erskine. That's about all I can say to you with regard to that.
Madam Chair, we do have
Yes.
executive session too.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. All right, any further discussion? All right, so